Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Vampire Book Club. How are you tonight? Tonight I am drinking Captain Morgan's Private Stock Spiced Rum with a Skull Ice Cube, because I guess there was a captain in this book. First, we deal with technical difficulties. I'm not seeing anyone in the chat. Is there anyone in the chat? Say something. I see nothing. There you are. Okay, now it's working. Thank you. All right. Okay. Had me a little worried there for a moment that nobody showed up for Vampire Book Club, which would be a travesty, though. I used to belong to a vampire book club in New York City. That was through meetup.com, and I didn't know anyone else in it, but I was looking on meetup.com for things to do, friends to make, and I saw there was a vampire book club in New York City. So I joined it, and I read the book, and then I went to the meeting, and there was only one other person there who was not the organizer or the moderator. So just me and this one stranger alone in this cafe where the book club met, and it's a little bit awkward, but I did read a very good vampire book for that, so I was happy to read it. And then the next month, I read the book, and I went to the meeting, and I was the only one there. Nobody else came to vampire book clubs, so I hope my vampire book club will never suffer the same fate as that particular vampire book club, because that would be very sad. I am, as usual, stalling for time to see if more people will be joining us, because they always do. What books did I read? I will tell you later, because it's relevant to something I'm going to talk about later. I don't want to say right now. Love Captain Morgan's Private Stock. It is delicious. And with a Skull Ice Cube. What are you drinking tonight? Always bring a drink to Vampire Book Club. Even if you don't drink alcohol, bring something. Vampires drink. It's what they do. So in honor of vampires, we drink at Vampire Book Club. Did I ever go to a meetup after that? Yes, I went to other meetups, but not the Vampire Book Club meetup. Yeah, I just stopped at the second one and never went again. But I did go to other meetups in New York, and I did make friends through those meetups. So I found people eventually. Writers groups. I met writer friends, if not book club friends. Coffin lid got stuck. Pepsi Mango. That sounds like an affront to God. I like mango, but Pepsi? Oh, you're brave. So the Vampire Book Club is held on my Discord server. Everyone is welcome to join. You don't have to read the books. You don't have to participate. You can join and lurk. Just be there. Listen to us talk about the books. We always talk about the book throughout the month on the Discord server, with spoilers covered, so you can read it or not read it and just listen to us talk about it. Up to you. This month, we read Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula. Oh, thank you, Red Spade Tree 7, for the $5. Maven, longtime sub, first time color. Haha. And I just wanted to thank you for all your work over the years. Cheers. Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Yes. So this month, we voted on 3 books, and they were all books about Sherlock Holmes meeting Dracula. There was the Fred Saberhagen sequel to the Dracula tape, where he meets Sherlock Holmes. There was one called Sherlock Holmes versus Dracula, which is an older book. And this one, which is a new book, just came out last year and has a very pretty cover. Everyone voted for this book, maybe because the cover was so pretty, maybe because it was more recent and easier to find, or maybe they just like the sound of it. So this one is not Sherlock Holmes versus Count Dracula. It's Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula. And the actual title of this book is The Classified Dossier, which isn't even on the cover, but it is right here. So if you look it up online, you're going to find it under The Classified Dossier, Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula, but usually that part gets cut off. So if you're looking for it and you see The Classified Dossier, that is the correct book. And I love a Victorian Gothic monster mash. Not that Sherlock Holmes is a monster, but anytime you take those classic characters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Edgar Allan Poe characters, Phantom of the Opera, Jekyll and Hyde, Dorian Gray, Sherlock Holmes, anything that's from that gas lamp Victorian era, and mix up those characters together, that's bait for me. That's how you catch me. You put that in a little box with a stick and you will catch yourself a Maven of the Eventide. I love it. So I was looking forward to this. I've read some Sherlock Holmes and Dracula crossovers before. There's a comic book. There's a few others. But yeah, there is, it's a very common thing. It's not like new or original. People do it all the time. Usually, Dracula's the enemy and Sherlock Holmes is the good guy. But this book did a different twist on it. So that was fun to read. Server is breaking up. So, I'll just tell you all about this book. Are you ready? Do we have enough people here yet? Let's see. Yeah, we're looking good. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. So, in this book, it starts off like a regular Sherlock Holmes novel. I have read probably 75% of the Sherlock Holmes canon. It's been a while. I never finished those last few stories. They're still on my TBR. But I've read a lot of Sherlock Holmes. I've watched the movies. I never watched any of the classic Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes, but I've watched all the more modern stuff. The what do we call it? BBC Sherlock Holmes, the Iron Man Sherlock Holmes, the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes. Sorry, I don't know why my voice is so froggy. I should probably drink more. That will help. The Great Mouse Detective, the best version of Sherlock Holmes that exists. And yeah, so I've seen a bunch. I've read a bunch. I wouldn't call myself a Sherlock Holmes fan, but definitely Sherlock Holmes educated. I'm aware. I've done the homework. So as a Sherlock Holmes book, it starts off very typical Sherlock Holmes story, and the writing style was an excellent pastiche. This author really captured the voice of Doyle's Watson, the way he narrates stories, and the language he uses was very fine for the time period. Nothing felt like it took me out of the story and made me think, oh, this is fan fiction. It was a very well done fan fiction, which is perfectly valid. I'm always here to support fan fiction. I do not deride it. And this author did a great job of doing Watson's voice. So, excuse me. Dracula comes to Sherlock Holmes with a problem. He's a client. He's not the bad guy. Though, perhaps I should back up a little bit. There was a murder. So first there's a murder, and Sherlock Holmes and Watson are confused about it. They're trying to figure it out. We as the reader can tell it was a vampire murder, but Holmes and Watson are not aware that vampires exist. If you read Sherlock Holmes, there's times that seems something supernatural, it always turns out that there was a natural explanation for it. So like Hound of the Baskervilles, you think it's a ghost dog, turns out it was just, a prank. And so they don't believe in the supernatural. They don't believe that vampires exist. So Dracula comes to their flat and says that his wife has been kidnapped. And his wife is Mina from the classic book Dracula, which exists in this world. And Sherlock Holmes hasn't read it, but Watson has. And Watson says, what? I read that book by Bram Stoker. You're saying that you're real and it exists and it wasn't just a story. And Dracula says, well, it was just a story because Stoker lied about stuff. Everything he said wasn't true. I'm not a bad guy like he said. I'm actually a good guy. I'm a vampire, right? I eat people, but I didn't do all those things he said I did in the book. I didn't kill those people he said I killed in the book. Mina didn't hate me. Mina actually fell in love with me. We're happily married now. I made her a vampire. She's my vampire bride and she loves it. But my other 3 wives, he calls them sisters now, not wives or not brides. Yeah, it was very much like the Dracula tape. Exactly. So his other 3 brides / sisters back at his castle did not love Mina. Apparently, Dracula's not like a normal vampire. He's a very human-thinking vampire, but most vampires are very feral, very monstrousness. They don't reason like humans or have feelings like humans. So when he brought Mina home, who luckily was also a very human-like vampire, they explain later that it takes a certain like personality to keep your personality when you become a vampire. Most people who aren't like good, elevated, moral people just turn into these feral monsters of vampires, and they're always like, you know, just killing people, and they don't have their morality anymore. But Mina, of course, she's like Superwoman, so of course she kept her personality because she's practically perfect in every way. Sorry, I don't know why my voice is so froggy. But his sisters didn't like her, so they were like, Caddy, we don't want this other bitch in our house. They were fighting, so Dracula kicked them out of the house. It was like, be gone, I'm gonna live here with my bride Mina now. And now the sisters are on the loose, and he says one of them is like the alpha, and the other two follow her in everything she does. And she's come to England, and turns out she was behind these murders in part. But the way that the story had started, that set up that maybe vampires exist for the readers to believe, is Sherlock Holmes got a finger in a box as evidence from a crime scene, and the finger wasn't rotting, it wasn't deteriorating, because it's a vampire finger, and he's doing experiments on it, and it explodes when silver touches it. Oh, I put it in sunlight and it catches fire. So the reader's like, yeah, that's a vampire finger, but Holmes and Watson are very confused. But then when Dracula shows up, he's like, I am Dracula. You read my book. You know I'm real. I'm actually a vampire. And they're like, but how? Magic doesn't exist. And so they conclude that there's a scientific explanation for vampires. Dracula cannot turn into bats. He can't turn into wolf. He can't turn into a mist. He is immortal. He will live forever. He doesn't age. The sun does burn him up if he hasn't fed recently, or if he's like weak, like weaker vampires burn up. But as we know in the book, Dracula does go out in the daytime when it's cloudy, protects himself from the sun. So if you're a vampire with enough strength of character and you've eaten recently, you can go out in the daytime. But all the other like stuff Stoker said about vampires was just, supernatural hogwash. And like crosses don't bother them, religious stuff doesn't bother them. It's an entirely scientific state of being. He has a blood disease that has transformed his body. So he comes and he says that Mina's been kidnapped by some evil vampires, and he suspects his brides are behind it, or someone, but he's also like, my brides are too stupid and animalistic to be behind it, so there has to be like an evil vampire mastermind behind it. And they're like, but who's more evil and masterful than Dracula? And he's like, I don't know, that's the problem here, that's why I need Sherlock Holmes's help. They just happened to come to London to do it. And they think for a while that Van Helsing might be behind it, and we find out that Jonathan Harker died a long time ago, but all the other, band of heroes from Dracula are still alive, and even Quincy is still alive, because of course Dracula never killed Quincy, because he's a good Dracula, and he would never do that. And he tells a story about how they came to London, and as soon as they were ready to get off the ship, they were ambushed. Mina got kidnapped, and he narrowly escaped by diving in the water. And it turns out the reason vampires can't cross running water is because if water closes over their head, they go into this deep coma, which he thinks will kill them. And he's like, it's one of the only ways any vampire can die. Just like even a minute underwater and you'll be dead, because you just go into this coma state and you just sink to the bottom of the river. So earlier, Holmes and Watson had been following up on the finger lead, and they had gone out to Carfax Estate, and they found a burned up vampire woman there and 2 dead humans. So Dracula tells us that that woman was one of his 3 brides, and he went there and he found her and he killed her goons, and he's trying to follow up and find Mina, but he can't. So now he's come to Sherlock Holmes, and he looks at the finger in the box and he's like, oh, that's Mina's finger. I can tell just by looking at it. So they know Mina is somewhere, and his other 2 brides are on the loose. And there's probably other vampires around, because the brides are too stupid to do any of this. They're not smart enough to mastermind this kind of thing by themselves, but they don't know who it could be. They're like, maybe it's Van Helsing. They're like, could Van Helsing have been a vampire all along? And Dracula's like, I really don't know how I could have missed that. I really don't think it's possible. And Sherlock Holmes is like, we must not rule out any possibility. So Watson is very much against Dracula. He's like, Holmes, you can't possibly work for this monster. How could you even consider working for this monster? And Holmes is like, I consider many things. And he kind of talks Watson into trusting Dracula at least as much as Holmes trusts him, because of course Watson trusts everything that Holmes trusts. So Watson very reluctantly agrees to go along with this. But while he's like mad about it, Dracula freezes him. He can like kind of hypnotize him into not moving, and so he does his power over him, and Watson's like, I really didn't like it when he like froze me in place. So Dracula leaves, and there's a blurb at the beginning of this book where Watson talks about how these are all the cases of Sherlock Holmes that involve supernatural things that he could never publish in the Strand magazine, where he published all of his other cases, because it was just too fantastical for the people to believe. So these are that classified dossier of cases that he's now releasing to the public. So he tells us also at the beginning that he had to change the dates and stuff around to protect people's privacy. So surprise, his wife Mary is still alive, even though she dies much earlier in the timeline. But she's actually still alive in this version, but she's like on vacation or something. So after Dracula leaves, and they've agreed to help him find Mina, Watson like has this vision of his wife Mary, and he hears her like calling to him. So even though Holmes tells him to stay inside and don't go anywhere while he goes off to chase clues, Watson goes out and follows this vision, and he's like hypnotized. He's like being lured. And he gets into this cab, and the cab takes him to this place, and Mary's there. And he's like, Mary, what are you doing in town? You were supposed to be on vacation. And she lures him to him. Turns out she's a vampire. She bites his neck. She turns Watson into a vampire. And turns out the cab driver was also a vampire. And so Watson undergoes a transformation to a vampire, which most people don't survive. And if they eat the blood of a person during that transformation, then they become a feral animalistic vampire that kind of loses their soul and becomes like a new person, which is what Mary is. He's like, I didn't even recognize my own wife. There's a beast inside of her that has taken over Mary's body. She's not my Mary anymore. But he refuses to eat people. So they take him to an opium den, and Mary tries to get him to eat a person, but he fights and he escapes and he runs away. So he spends a week on the run going through his vampire transformation, like living in the dirt, you know, going through the worst slums of London, until he like passes out in a ditch and then is found by Dracula and Holmes, who finally bring him back home, and they rehabilitate him. And when he wakes up in his bed at home, he's like, what? How did I get here? And Dracula's like there in his room, and he's like, you must have been the one to turn Mary into a vampire. I knew you were bad all along. And he tries to fight him, but of course he can't fight Dracula. Dracula's like, no, I'm here to help you. You're a vampire now, and I'm here to make it easier. And Holmes comes in, and he's like, he's telling the truth. And Watson's like, I still don't believe you. So they kind of fight about, but Watson eventually gives in to Holmes and agrees. So they tell Watson that because he had such strength and fortitude of character, that even though he was feral and out of his mind and couldn't even remember half the things, it was like a fever dream, he still resisted eating people the entire time he was a vampire, even when it would have been easy for him to do. So it shows he has a strength of character to like retain his personality. And they feed him pig's blood in a teapot and chicken's blood, and he like pours cups of blood in his teacups. That's how he survives, and he can survive perfectly fine off chicken blood or pig blood, and he just drinks like a few teacups full of that every day, and he's good. So he's able to live his vampire life. He can't go out in the sun very well. He has to like really cover himself up and bundle up, but he can, and he feels sleepy when he's out there and gets his full strength back after dark, but he can. So they are still trying to figure out who turned Mary into a vampire. Who turned the cab driver into a vampire? There's someone out there making more vampires. And Dracula is like going around trying to find where Mina is, trying to find out who's behind it. They're still thinking maybe it's Van Helsing. Who else could it be? And they follow a lead to this place where they think the vampires are being made in the basement of this building, because they like was a tobacco shop, and Holmes knows everything about tobacco that was ever written about tobacco. He's written many epigraphs about it. So they go to this tobacco shop, and they go down into the basement where they think these new vampires are being like manufactured, like a factory of vampires. And meanwhile, Dracula's explained that that's literally impossible. Vampires cannot make other vampires that way. It takes like a very elder vampire, maybe not one as ancient as me, but definitely one pretty ancient, to be able to make so many vampires at once. It just makes no sense. I don't understand. But they follow the clues. They get there, and they find in the basement not the vampires that they were looking for, but a coffin that's like chained shut. So they open it up, and in it is Mina, but submerged under the water. And she's clearly been under that water long enough for her to die the way vampires can die, which has been set up. But you know, she's completely limp and dead, and they're like, oh, we were too late. And Dracula just like goes feral, and he's like, England has taken my wife from me, so now I will take my revenge on England. And Holmes and Watson are like, but you promised you weren't evil. And he's just like feral. And then all of a sudden Mina wakes up, and she's like, Vlad? Which pisses me off. I hate it when Dracula versions say that he's literally Vlad the Impaler. Like, we know Stoker took inspiration from Vlad and all the other voivodes and Draculas of the time, but he's not literally supposed to be a historical figure. But no, apparently his name is actually Vlad. So Mina's not dead. And Dracula's like, what? Turns out he was wrong. All these centuries that water could kill vampires, it just puts them in a coma. So it's like most vampires would fall into the bottom of the ocean and never wake up, so they might as well be dead. But if one were to pull them out of the ocean, surprise, they're not dead. So now that Mina's out of the water, she's awake. And she's like, I'm actually fine. So like, well, we rescued Mina, but we still don't know who's behind the murders, what's going on. So they go back upstairs, and then they start getting shot at. And it's been established that vampires are susceptible to silver, so Holmes and Watson have silver bullets, and the person shooting at them is shooting with silver bullets. So Dracula sneaks out to try to go find the sniper. Holmes gets shot. No one else gets shot. None of the vampires get shot because Watson, Mina, and Dracula are all vampires. Holmes is the only human here. He's the one that gets shot. So Dracula goes out, and he catches the sniper, and he kills him. He doesn't mean to kill him, though. He just means to kind of like toss him away, but he tosses him really hard, and the sniper dies. And later on, we find out that the sniper was Jack Seward the whole time, and I'm just like, oh, Jack, you're evil too. It's like this thing about how all the good guys in Dracula were actually the bad guys and actually evil because Dracula was innocent all along. Yeah, so Jack Seward was the sniper. That's his cameo in this book. He's dead now because Dracula threw him too hard. He's sorry about it. He didn't mean to. But meanwhile, Holmes is like bleeding out. He had lied and said it was just like a graze and he didn't really get hurt. But then Watson looks at him and he's like, no, dude, you're dying. And Holmes is literally dying. And Watson is like trying to do his like field surgery on him with his medical kit, which he always carries because he's a doctor. And he's trying to get the bullet out. And Holmes is like, it's in too deep. I'm going to die. And Mina's like, we should make him a vampire. And Watson's like, do you want me to make you a vampire? And Holmes is like, no, I don't have the strength of character to be like a good vampire because I'm a logical mind, not an emotional mind. And you have to be an emotional mind to be made like a human-like vampire. So I would become one of the feral monster vampires. So no, don't make me a vampire. I don't want to be the feral monster. I'm not the right personality type. He's an INTJ and he just can't be a vampire. So Watson's like, well, I can't just let you die. And Holmes is like, it's okay, man. So then it's kind of like a fade to black and Watson's like, I'm going to get that bullet. I'm going to save you. Cut to next scene. Holmes is fine. He recovered. So he got the bullet out. Holmes is still alive. But he's injured, so he's like, oh, I can't go chase clues and I'm bored. And you know when Holmes is bored, that's bad news. He's just doing a lot of smoking. There's a lot of smoking in this book. Everyone's smoking all the time, and the pipe fumes are like filling through him. We have found out that Watson's sense of smell is very heightened. So like the smoke smell really bothers him. His hearing is very heightened. His vision is heightened sometimes in certain circumstances, but in other times his vision is worse. It's weird. And he also has like double human strength, and he can like jump really far and do other kinds of vampire-y things. So while Holmes has been convalescing, Dracula and Mina have gone out chasing clues. So they track down Dracula's other vampire bride, and some other vampire minions, and they find out that there is a master vampire out there making a factory's worth of vampires that are just like, he's making a vampire army, whoever this guy is, and they're like, is it Van Helsing? And Dracula's like, I really think I would have noticed if Van Helsing was a vampire. And they're like, I don't know. You were wrong about that water thing. Who knows? So they find out from one of his other brides before they kill her that this guy is called the Mariner Priest. They're like, a priest? Vampires and priests? That's a weird combination. They're like, but Mariner, maybe he's a sea captain. Maybe he's a pirate. Maybe he has a boat. No, it's not Jonathan, because we do know that Jonathan died years ago after, he lost Mina to Dracula. So the Mariner Priest is our big bad. We don't know his identity. He might be Van Helsing, but we don't know for sure. So the Mariner Priest, they're kind of chasing clues, and eventually they figure out that he's made all these vampires out of like criminals around town, people that would like to join him. He's made a bunch of sailors into a vampire, and then he gets on a boat and he kind of pieces out of London. And Holmes is like, it's the perfect plan. He's immortal. He knows he can't defeat me. So he's just going to go out to sea and live on the high seas until I die of old age, and then come back to London and like take over the world. It's the perfect plan. Anyone, I have to think like a vampire. I'm not thinking in terms of like vampires and immortality. He's just going to stay out there to sea forever. And Watson's like, so we lost this case? And Holmes is like, I guess so. Don't print it in the papers because we lost. You only print the times I win. Though there are a couple Holmes stories where he does lose that Watson did write up. Now I'm all out of my Captain Morgan. So the Mariner Priest, sea captain, he's gone out to sea. He's gone. The end of part 1 of 4. So this book was originally separate short stories that were published and then compiled into a book. And the short stories do immediately follow on each other's heels. So even though they do have parts, it doesn't feel disjointed. It doesn't feel unconnected. So the next part is a while later. Watson is now a vampire. Dracula and Mina have gone back home to Transylvania. They don't know where the Mariner Priest is. He's on the high seas. They might never see him again. So they go back to their regular Sherlock Holmesing life. Except the difference now is that Watson is a vampire. So now they're solving a new mystery. The new mystery is there's a dead body in a hotel. And this dead body is bloated with seawater like it drowned at sea. And they're like, how did a dead body that drowned at sea get up into a hotel room? Who brought it here? And the people that were in that hotel room was a lady and her kid sister. And they're like, these two women couldn't possibly have dragged a bloated dead body that drowned at sea up here. But the story was that this man had come to their room, and then shortly after, the two girls had run out of the room and disappeared into the night, didn't even take their luggage with them. So they don't know what's going on. So Holmes already is like suspicious about this body because he's supposedly a constable from America. He has like a star badge, like a Wild West sheriff. But there's only one pinhole of that badge in his vest, and Holmes is like, if he was putting on this badge every day, he would have many pinholes in his vest. So I suspect someone switched bodies here. So Holmes and Watson split up to follow clues to try to find out where the girls went and who this dead guy is. And Watson, as a vampire, eventually finds out where the girls are staying in a different hotel, and he goes and he talks to them, and they tell him that they are like refugees from America, and they were trying to escape America, and they'd stolen something, and now these bad guys are trying to trace them down to get this thing they've stolen. And they don't really give any details, but while Watson's there, one of the bad guys comes and like shows up at the door, and he stinks of fish. He just has this horribly disgusting, stinky, fishy smell. And Watson opens the door, and he's like, what? I'm a badass vampire. You're going to come in here and cost these two women? And the big burly guy is like, let me in. And Watson like does his vampire stuff and scares the guy off. But when he like turns back around, the girls are gone. And there's a golden diadem, a circlet, a crown, a tiara sitting on the table that has all these really weird sea creatures like etched into it. And he's looking at it and he's like, what is this creepy crown? So he takes it back home and he goes to, Holmes comes home and Watson's like, I found stuff. And Holmes is like, let me tell you my story first. So Holmes, meanwhile, had gone to the docks and he found the ship that supposedly the women came in on, or there was another ship, there's like, he's trying to hunt down the ship thing, and he finds a guy that escapes off the ship. And the guy is like, yeah, it was my first time on the voyage of the ship. I'm just a regular American. I'm from this little town called Innsmouth in Massachusetts. And in Innsmouth, I decided to be a sailor, and I joined this ship that was going to go to England that magically got here in 4 days. And they're like, how could a ship cross the Atlantic in 4 days? It's a sailing ship, not a steamer ship. And he tells a story of how he was a hand on the ship, and they did these weird rituals, and they like chanting, and they spoke in this weird language, and like things were very eerie and incomprehensible to his tiny human mind. And so while he was on the ship, they did this weird ritual which like chanting, and they tossed looked like bodies over shore, and they're like, it's just cows we're tossing as tributes to the sea gods, but they were probably human bodies. And then they put down these chains, and the chains latch onto Dagon, the god of the depths. If you know your Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, Dagon, god of the depths. And he like hooks onto these chains, and then he just like bolts them across the Atlantic in 4 days. And so that's how they got to England in 4 days, by making sacrifices to Dagon. So when they were getting close, they're like, okay, we have to release ourselves from Dagon, and they're trying to like haul the chains back up, but they can't. So there's this like frantic scramble of where they're trying to cut the chains, and while they're cutting the chains, a bunch of hands get like sucked off board. And what he noticed was when they were doing the ritual to summon Dagon, they were wearing this golden crown, right? So that's the crown. And when Watson hears Holmes tell the story that he learned from this guy, because he bought the guy a drink and the guy told him his whole life story, apparently, Watson's like, well, I have that crown. Here's what they're looking for. And Holmes is like, brilliant, Watson. So they're trying to figure out where the girls went. And then Lestrade comes in, because he's in the story too. Yeah, he shows up a few times, and a lot of other like police cop characters from Sherlock Holmes show up. And Lestrade's like, hey, that girl who we suspected of murder of that bloated sea guy turned herself in and asked to be arrested and asked to be put into our most secure basement cell possible. So we put her down there. And then, like, she mysteriously disappeared. Someone sprung her from jail and she escaped. So they go to the jail and they look at it, and Watson's like, I smell that horrible fishy smell with my vampire senses. It's that whole, like, disgusting fishy smell I smelled from the guys. Because, like, Lovecraftian sea voyagers always have that incomprehensible, horrible stench. So the entire wall was torn out. And Sherlock Holmes is like, hey, Watson, try your vampire strength on the bars on this wall and see if you can tear them out. And he's like, I can't even do that with my vampire strength. Something even stronger than I did it. And they're like, oh, that's super creepy. So they, they follow their clues. They do their thing. They eventually find the ship again. That's clearly the ship that came across the Atlantic 4 days. It has all these weird portholes where all the like chains and stuff go down. And they go there and they talk to the sea crew. And the sea crew is like, you have our golden crown. And they're like, well, you have these innocent women. If we give you the crown, will you give us the women back? And they're like, yes, go get the crown. And Watson's like, okay, I'll stay here and Holmes will get the crown. They're like, no, Holmes will stay here and you will get the crown. Watson's like, oh, shit. So they take Holmes captive, and he's just like sitting on the boat like this. Watson runs all the way home, gets the crown, comes all the way back, and the boat's gone. And he's like, oh no, the boat's gone. Where's Holmes? I don't know what's going on. No, they took Holmes. And, he's very sad because he loves Holmes so much. And then while he's standing there freaking out, all these like Lovecraftian fish people like like bulbous-eyed, half fish, half frog, half human people come crawling out of the depths and up onto the dock. And Watson's trying to talk to them, and they like only speak fish language. And he's like, "This is what you want, this crown. Well, give me the women back. Give me my friend Holmes back." And they're like, fish language. And he doesn't know what's going on. So he takes the crown and he throws it out to sea. And all the fish people dive back into sea. And then Holmes returns on a police boat with the kid's sister, but not the older girl. So he comes back and Watson's like, "What? You were safe the whole time?" So there had been this big storm that came up. The storms are a common theme. So like in the Dracula story, the first Dracula story, the storms were there. And they always came when Dracula came. So when the Lovecraftian fish monsters were there, the storms came and Watson couldn't see anything. And there's this very like, the Thames River is a big plot into, and the Thames is seen as very unruly, very impossible to navigate, very like scary, like a boat goes in there and may never come back. So Holmes comes back and he's like, "Well, here's what happened to me when I was on the ship." And then he tells his story about how he was on that ship and he was trying to like fight his way, and he like tricked them, and he got down to the hole where the two women were, and the older woman is like, "Take my kid's sister and save her, but you can't take me. I have what they want." And he thinks she's talking about the crown, right? And so he takes it. She's like, "I refuse to come with you. If you try to take me, then I will reveal your secret and we'll all die." And he's like, "Okay, I'll take your kid's sister and I'll leave." So Holmes took the kid's sister and left. And the woman got taken off to sea with the horrible fish monster Innsmouth crew of terrible, and they got their crown back. And they're like, Watson's like, "Oh, I guess we lost this one again. Oh no, another one we lost." And then while later, so they find out that the murdered person at the beginning was the guy. It was just the guy that the girls were supposed to meet, but they bloated his body with seawater and then switched his identities with the captain of the ship. So, it was a ruse. I'm sorry, I don't know why my camera is freaking out. So I go over here. It just wants to follow me everywhere. Of course it doesn't do it that time. Nicholas keeps getting off center and that bothers me. It's gotta be centered. There. Okay. So then they're like reading newspaper articles later, and they find out that the woman got forced to be married to the guy from the ship, and turns out she had been pregnant the whole time. So the thing that was theirs that they wanted back was the baby, because she's trapped in the horrible Lovecraftian town of Innsmouth where she has to procreate and create more monsters. It's a tragedy. The end. Next story. Totally different. So Holmes and Watson, they've been like, Watson's still a vampire, living his vampire life, and, doing some more cases. They still haven't figured out who the Mariner Priest is. Mina is constantly writing them letters from Transylvania being like, "Here's the news, here's what's going on, but we don't have any answers yet." And they have since apparently established a watch. They call it the Midnight Watch, of this one vampire named Kitty Winter and some other ruffians who watch the graveyards and the morgues for any newly created vampires, because there's still newly created vampires being made in London. And whenever they find this newly created vampire, they kill it before it can go into that feral frenzy state. And they're like, "Who's still in London creating vampires? We don't know. The Mariner Priest is at sea for the next 100 years until Sherlock Holmes dies. So it can't be him." And we know that he took Mary with him, and he took all the other vampires they knew with him. But his graveyard watch finds a dead body in a grave. And in the dead body's pocket is a pearl that Watson knows is one of Mary's pearls, because from one of the previous Sherlock Holmes stories, there was a plot point where they found some pearls and Watson gave 6 pearls to Mary. So this dead body has one of Mary's pearls in it. And Watson's like, how could he get one of Mary's pearls? And he recognizes this pearl, right? Not like all pearls look alike. Maybe Mary didn't go with the Mariner Priest. Maybe Mary's still in London and has been in England the whole time. So they're trying to find out who this dead guy is and who killed him. So Watson goes out in the daytime, which is really hard for him. He's wearing his big hat and his big cloak, and he's just kind of shuffling around in the sunlight. And Holmes goes and he chases his own clues. So Watson finds out that the guy who's dead he was a groundskeeper at the cemetery, but he was kind of rich and is like, why would a rich guy be a groundskeeper at the cemetery? So he traces him to a nearby mansion. This is like very derelict gothic mansion that's in disrepair, and there's this woman living there who is his sister, and she has a butler, but it's like the three of them living in this giant mansion. So he tells the woman that her brother is dead. Very sorry, ma'am. And she's like very grumpy and mean, and she's like, well, I guess I'll tell you everything I can just to get you away faster. And Watson's like, thanks. So she brings him into the derelict gothic mansion and serves him tea, and she's like, why aren't you drinking your tea? And he's like, because I'm a vampire and it tastes gross. He doesn't tell her that. It's a secret. So she tells him that her brother was, mentally disabled, slow, and he liked to go to the graveyard and like trim the bushes. So the graveyard was like, hey, we'll make you an official groundskeeper, even though he was a rich boy and he didn't really need it. But their family had fallen on hard times, so he kind of did, even though it was beneath him to be a groundskeeper. But because he's like the village idiot, apparently they took pity on him. But he also had dealings with shady figures, and he was like helping these smugglers with their smuggling ring because, he's mentally disabled and people took advantage of him to do smuggling. So the guy had bites on him, but the bites hadn't, like vampire bites, but the bites weren't what had killed him. He was killed by a gunshot, and the bites had lipstick around them. And Holmes is like, could it have been Mary biting him? And Watson is like, Mary would never wear lipstick. That's for tarts and whores. She was a lady. And Holmes is like, but is she still the same Mary anymore? Maybe she did wear lipstick. And meanwhile, Kitty Winter, who's a very like woman of the streets kind of sassy vampire, even she doesn't wear lipstick. So Watson's trying to figure out how this guy died. And so the sister tells him like where the shady contacts were, like what pubs he met in them, and then she's like, get out of my house. So Watson leaves, and he's trying to get home, but now it's like broad daylight. Oh, also, while he was stalking the house, he saw another vampire also stalking the house, and this vampire was this very giant of a man with beads in his hair, wearing a beaver hat, which we find out later he's French Canadian, and in old Westy times, beaver hats were things that French Canadians wore. He's another vampire, and Watson's like trying to avoid him. So Watson is trying to get home, but the sun is too much for him because it happens to be a sunny day in London this time. Very unusual. So he goes into this pub, and he's like, hey, this happens to be the pub where, the dead guy used to hang out. Maybe I can find out more information here. So he's sitting in the pub, and everyone's looking at the pub like, who's this rich ponce coming to our pub? But then Watson pretends to drink beer, and they're like, hey, he's one of us. So he's sitting in the pub, and all of a sudden, some other guy comes in. This very American looking like Wild West guy comes in, and he comes over to Watson's table, and he's like, hi, my name is Thorne. I am from Texas. I'm like a U.S. Marshal from Texas that's gone rogue. No, he says he's from Kansas, not Texas. Sorry, Kansas. And his name is Thorne. He's from Kansas. He was really U.S. Marshal. He's very tall and imposing, and he tells him that he's a vampire hunter. And Thorne says, I am hunting Mary. Mary's still in town. I know she was your wife, and I know you want to protect her because you're an awful vampire too, but I'm going to kill Mary, and don't you dare get in my way. And Watson's like, what? And he's like, I'm going to kill Mary in 3 days. And Watson's like, but I could kill her today, and then she wouldn't kill 3 more people because she kills a person every night, because apparently she was alive, and she is still in town. And, Watson's like, you're telling me I can't kill her because you want this kill. It's important to you for some reason. But to me, that's wrong because that gives her 3 extra days to harm people. Whereas if I found her and, stopped her tonight, maybe killed her, I don't know. She's still my wife. I have complicated feelings about this. That would be better. And Thorne is like, but no, it must be done my way. I have an emotional investment in this for some reason. And Watson's like, well, I can't stand for that. And because he's a vampire and Thorne's not, Watson's about to like throw his weight into this. But then the big scary French Canadian vampire comes in and he grabs Watson, and it's a vampire fight. And Thorne also has silver bullets, so he's firing. It's a big old vampire tavern brawl. Watson versus this guy whose name is Boucher. And they fight. And shots are fired. Watson. Okay, I don't know if this was like a plot hole or an editing error in this book, but Watson gets hit by bullets 2 times, and then later on he's like, no, the bullets missed me. I didn't get hit. And I'm just like, did this not get edited correctly? Did I read it wrong? It's very confusingly written, but no. Bar brawl. The police show up, so the vampire and the Kansas guy escape. And Lestrade comes in and he's like, Dr. Watson, what's going on here? And he's like, these scary guys escape. Go out the back door, catch them. But they go out the back door and they're gone. Mysterious. So Watson goes back home to Holmes and he tells him, everything that happened to him. And meanwhile, Holmes is telling him like what he's investigating. Sorry, I don't know why my camera keeps doing that. And he finds, like, Holmes is like, how tall was this man Thorne? And Watson was like, he was pretty tall. And Thorne says, Sherlock says, I've researched Thorne, and he wasn't that tall. He was shorter than I am. And Watson's like, no, he was definitely taller than you are. And Sherlock's like, confusing. Maybe the reports are wrong. I don't know. He was like, but he really wanted to kill Mary for some reason. And, now we know Mary's in town because the Pearl was here. Meanwhile, Holmes has investigated the ship. And he's, like, found out these other guys. They've been promised to be paid in pearls. And, plot. There's a lot of story here. I'm kind of struggling to remember. Yeah, I should take notes when I read these books so I can recap these stories to you better, but I don't. I just do it off the top of my head. Every month I regret it. So stuff happens. And then we get to the end where they track down this Kansas guy, and Mary, which he called Maggie, like she has a new identity. And they track him down to the docks where the ship was that's about to leave. And Holmes and Watson are on a roof. They're doing a stakeout. They're up there on this roof for like 3 hours doing the stakeout. And then they finally see this woman with a bag over her head get brought out by the Kansas guy and the French Canadian. They're like, it's Mary. He has her. He's going to kill her. They're like, but wait, this is suspicious. And then they see another woman come out behind them. And that's Mary. She's in on the plot. They weren't vampire hunters at all. And the woman they have with the bag over her head is Kitty Winter. Oh no, their friend. So there's a big old like showdown. Holmes and Watson come down off the roof and they're like, we're going to push your friend Kitty Winter into the water and then she'll drown. And he's like, oh, they don't know the truth that vampires don't drown. Suspicious. Who's behind this? Is it the mariner priest? Is he sending telegrams from the high seas? We don't know. So the Texas guy is like, I'm going to escape on my boat with Mary because she's my girlfriend and we're going to escape and you're just going to stand there and let us. But then they have a showdown. Mary, they fight Boucher. They like shoot him a bunch of times. He gets shot with silver bullets. He falls in the water and like, well, he's a goner. They rescue Kitty. They get her away. Mary and Thorne run onto the boat and they cut the moorings and they leave. And they're like, where's the crew? Why isn't the crew coming up to like man this sailing boat? And Holmes is like, oh yeah, I had the whole crew arrested earlier today. You're on that boat all alone, going off into the sea with no one to like batten down the hatches and do all those other sailor things sailors do. So the boat's kind of rocking back and forth. And Watson says that the boat's probably going to tip over at any moment. So Holmes and Watson get on another boat and they run and they're trying to like jump onto the boat as it's sailing away, and Holmes jumps and he almost makes it and he's like hanging off the edge, and Watson's like, it gets even further away and Watson's like, how would I possibly jump? But he jumps because he has vampire power. So he gets on the deck and then he pulls up Holmes, and then it's a showdown on the deck between Mary, who's like, haha, I am evil now, and Thorne is my boyfriend. And Thorne is like, I'm actually Quincy Morris from Dracula. I'm from Texas. Yes, I am taller, and I took that Thorne guy's identity, and it was Quincy all along, and surprise, he's the bad guy now. And he's in love with Mary because he was in love with Lucy, who turned into a vampire, and then kind of in love with Mina, who turned into a vampire. So he really just wants a vampire girlfriend for some reason, and he's into Mary now. But he wants to get away, but there's no, like, deckhands to run this boat, and then the boat is, there's another big storm. again, the giant storm comes, so a big old storm, and the boat is like rocking back and forth, and they're like, this boat is going to tip over. So then there's a showdown, a gunfight on the boat, and then Boucher like crawls out of the water. Somehow he survived the water and all the bullet holes in his back, because he's just like Frankenstein vampire for some reason. And they're fighting him, and they're fighting Mary, and then a fire starts, and then Mary's like just about to kill Holmes, so Watson shoots his own wife to save Holmes, and then is like traumatized by this forever. But he saves Holmes, the boat catches fire, he sees Mary and Quincy burned to death, Boucher dies, and Watson and Holmes jump into the water, escape just in time, just as Lestrade's police boat is pulling up. So Watson's like about to drown and go into the vampire coma thing, but they get him onto the police boat just in time, get him home, they're safe. Mary dies, Quincy dies, Boucher dies, the ship sinks to the bottom of the sea. Watson's very sad. And the way Watson had been dealing with the fact that his wife was an evil vampire up till now felt very not addressed. Like, he didn't think about her much, she didn't really factor in too much. Like, he would mention her once in a while and then just completely forget about her for everything. But now he really grieves. So now I'm like, okay, finally Watson is actually having feelings about his dead wife. Double dead now, because she was evil. She did lose her entire personality. She wasn't the Mary he knew. Yeah. So they get back to their, apartment, and they're like debriefing and everything, and he's sad, but he saved Holmes. So, yeah, that's how that one ends. So, 4th story out of 4. So next story starts. What time is it? Okay, we're doing good. We haven't even been at this for an hour yet. So, meanwhile, Mina's still writing Watson letters. So, this story starts with Kitty Winter telling them there's been like vampire activity going on, and they think the Mariner priest has come back to town, and they're also still wondering, like, why would Mary have come back to London when she had been away from London? Who made Mary a vampire? We still haven't solved that mystery. Who is the Mariner priest? And they have this idea that he's come back to town, so they write to Dracula, and they're like, hey Dracula, can you come back from Transylvania? We think he's back. We don't know why, because he had the perfect plan. Please come back and help us. And Mina's like, we can't, because our castle got firebombed, our castle exploded, and we were trapped in rubble for days, and someone is attacking our castle. They're like, could it be Van Helsing? Maybe it's Van Helsing all along. Like, we found out what happened to Seward, we found out what happened to Quincy, but we haven't heard from Holmwood or Van Helsing yet, so they could still be out there. They could still be behind all this. So they try to get Dracula to come back. At first Mina says she can't, but then they say they can. And they're like, never mind, we can come. We're on the next steamer ship, we're coming. So they're trying to figure out what's going on with the vampire attacks in London, and they're trying to figure out where it's coming from. And they find out that there's big vampire activity in this other town out of town. They have to take a train to get there. And they're like getting ready to go. They're waiting for Kitty and her sidekick, her human sidekick, whose name is like Salmsbury, that's the graveyard patrol, to come and get them to take them to the train to go find this vampire nest. But as they're waiting for this, they get a telegram that Dracula's steamer ship was sunk at sea. And Dracula and Mina, both being vampires, the water closed over their heads. Of course, they went to the coma state, and they're lost at sea. And Holmes is just like devastated. Like, he goes into this like emo funk. So they get on the cab, they get on the train, they go to this place, and he's just like so sad that his friend Dracula is dead now, or at least, eternally lost at sea. So they get to this town, and Kitty's like, okay, we saw some really suspicious activity. There's these people from this boat that seems to be the Mariner priest boat, because we found this guy that was a vampire that was clearly a sailor, so we know the Mariner priest must be back. And there's this place where I found that was being guarded by sailors. Very suspicious. So they go there, and they see the 2 human guards, and Kitty like dispatches them because she's a badass vampire chick. And they're like, this is really too easy. This is probably a trap. And they really understand that it's probably a trap, that they've been set up, that they're about to walk into some trouble, they're like, well, we don't really have a choice. If there's vampires here, we got to do the vampire killing business. So they walk into the trap. It's Holmes, Watson, Kitty, and Salisbury, if I'm remembering his name correctly. He's like her nerdy little friend. And so Holmes and Salisbury are the humans, Kitty and Watson are the vampires. So they go into this warehouse, and it's just empty. There's nothing there. And they're like, what? Where's the trap? There's no trap. I thought there'd be a trap. And they go in, and then they realize, Holmes is like, you see that spot of dirt on the floor? That spot of dirt clearly doesn't belong with the other dirt. It must have come from a basement. Let's look for a basement. They're like, how did you know that from a spot of dirt on the floor? And he's like, because I'm Sherlock Holmes. It's what I do. So they find the basement. They go down into the basement, and there's, it's very dark. Holmes has one lantern. And so once they get down there, they realize that there's like 50 vampires buried in this basement, and they all start like emerging up out of the earth, and it's gonna be like this huge vampire fight. So Holmes hangs up his lantern on the wall, and there's a letter on the wall, and he rips off the letter and puts it in his pocket. So Holmes, Watson, Kitty, and the other guy start fighting all these vampires, and vampires just keep coming, and this is really big fight scene, epic battle, very scary in the dark, and eventually the lantern goes out, and then they're in pitch black, and even the vampires can't see, and so it's this fight. It ends with Salisbury getting killed, but the other three surviving. And Kitty is very upset because he was her bro, and she's very sad that her bro died. But as Holmes gets out of it, he reads the letter that he ripped off the wall, and the letter says, I'm the mariner priest. I set you up to kill all these guys because they were my crew on my ship, but then they decided to mutiny, and they thought they could take over and be like better vampires than me. So I put them all here, and if you killed them, that's good for me. If they killed you, that's good for me. If y'all died, that's good for me. So I set you up, yes, because I am a criminal mastermind that would think of that, because turns out I am Moriarty. I'm still alive. I did not die at Reichenbach Falls, and I am a vampire. But there's no way he could be an elder vampire, which is what Dracula kept saying would be necessary to create an army of vampires. It would have to be an elder vampire, but Moriarty's only been a vampire for 12 years, right? And they're like, but how? And Watson's like, did you know it was Moriarty all along? And Sherlock Holmes is like, I had a feeling, but I couldn't be sure. So it was Moriarty all along. He is the mariner priest, and he had to come back to England. He couldn't enact his plan of staying out at the high seas because his crew mutinied, and that's why he had to come back, even though it was a perfect plan, if he says so himself. So Kitty stays behind to bury all the dead and to mourn her lost bro, and Holmes and Watson go home, and they're really beat up, and they're scratched, and they haven't slept in 24 hours, so they go back home. And as they're going back into 221B Baker Street, Watson gets grabbed, and he's like, no, and he starts fighting, and he sees Holmes get grabbed, and he's like, another fight on the street. But then it turns out it was just Dracula stopping him from going inside, and he's like, surprise, we're alive, we survived the ship being sunk, we made it, we're here to help you, but don't go upstairs because Moriarty is up there waiting to kill you. And they're like, what? So Dracula and Mina take him away, and they're like, yeah, Moriarty's in your apartment waiting to kill you. We have to go up there. And they're like, really? How do you know it's him? How you sure it's him? They're like, we saw him crawl in the window. Who else could it be? The mariner priest. It's Moriarty. So Holmes and Watson go back into the apartment the regular way, and Dracula and Mina sneak up the back way. So they go in, and they get jumped by this very scary vampire who's not Moriarty. Watson's like, I don't know what he looks like, but I don't think this very scary, hulking grimace of a man is Moriarty. So they fight him, they kill him. Dracula comes in and helps, and he kills him. And so yay, Dracula, our friend. And they find in his pocket a ticket for a boat. And they had found out that in Moriarty's letter, he said, by the time you read this, I will be out on the ocean, lost to sea. So they're like, this is the boat that he's going to take. And Holmes is like, but no, that's what he wants us to think. This boat is a ruse. He is not actually taking a boat. I bet instead he's taking a train. And they're like, how do you know that? He's like, because I'm Sherlock Holmes. It's what I do. So they go to the train station. They don't take the bait. They don't follow the boat. And at the train station, Holmes is like, Mina and Watson, pretend to be a couple walking around in the station and see what you can see, whereas Dracula and I would be really recognized because we're such famous people. So we're going to hide in the shadows while you and Mina look around and see what you can see. I bet Moriarty has a private train leaving at this time because I'm Sherlock Holmes and I know that. So they go and they're walking around the station. They eventually see someone who's obviously a vampire working on a very little train, and they're like, that must be Moriarty's private train. So Mina like kills this vampire, and Watson's like, oh no, we're gonna get cut, let's hide it. Mina's like, actually, let's tell everyone, like, hello, help, this person attacked me and now he just fell down. So in the hubbub of everyone running to see this vampire that she just knocked unconscious, Watson and Mina get on the train, and in the train, there's 4 other vampires that attack them, and the train starts leaving the station. And Watson's like, oh no, Sherlock and Dracula, they missed their chance, so it's up to me and Mina to save the day. So the 4 other vampires attack them, and they fight. Mina rips out the throat of one of the vampires, and Watson just kind of knocks unconscious the others. And Watson, besides having silver bullets, he has a special weapon, which is like a walking stick, which has like a silver knob on one end and a silver spike on the other, and it's really good for killing vampires. Even though like Boucher got shot 8 times and survived, apparently any other vampire that just gets like stabbed with silver immediately dies. It's very convenient. So he and Mina fight and knock out all 4 vampires. And Watson's like, they're not dead. And Mina's like, we could finish them off now. And he's like, but no, I don't want them to die because then I would be as bad as they are. So he like bandages up the one with the broken throat and just like leaves him unconscious. And Mina's like, you do have strength of character, Doctor. You're not like the other vampires. And he's like, yes, this is the world I'm fighting for. If I'm as bad as them, what am I even trying to save? So he and Mina go through the train. You get to the end of the train and they finally get like to Moriarty's like a really fancy train car. Very cool train car. And there's like a bunch of mathematics books on the bookshelves, and he's like, yep, it's Moriarty, all right. At the very end of the train, they see Moriarty himself, actually Moriarty, the description of the professor, going out the back where like the little ladder is to climb up to the roof. and Moriarty's like, haha, you can't catch me. So he climbs up on the roof, and they chase after him, and then it's like a roof train high-speed showdown thing. So they're chasing Moriarty across the roof, and they're like, oh no, we're gonna lose him. And then Sherlock Holmes climbs up on the roof, and he's like, haha, I was here all along, surprise. And he tries to get Moriarty, and they tussle, but then Moriarty gets him. And because Moriarty is a vampire, he's very strong, so he's like grabbing Sherlock by the neck, and he's just like holding him, and he's like, you can't shoot me now, Watson, I have Sherlock as a meat shield. And, you know, he's doing his thing where he's like, I am the smartest smarty pants that ever existed, and you'll never be on my level, and you never like stop me. And Watson's like, I don't know what to do. And Mina's like, I don't know what to do. And then Moriarty's like, Dracula, I know you're here. I know you gotta be here. And Dracula's like not answering. Moriarty's like, I'm gonna throw Sherlock off the train. And then all of a sudden Dracula appears through the fog, standing on the train. And just at that moment, Sherlock grabs Moriarty and like flips him, and he's like, oh, that's like really surprising. How did he have the strength to do that? And then Watson has a chance to shoot Moriarty, and Dracula shoots Moriarty, and then Sherlock bites Moriarty's neck, and Watson's like, that's really weird. Why is Sherlock Holmes ripping out his neck with his teeth? That's not a thing Sherlock Holmes would ever do. But then turns out, surprise, Sherlock Holmes and Dracula switched outfits. And because they're both very tall and have pointy noses, and it was very stinky up there, and Moriarty couldn't smell anything, and it was dark and smoky, it was enough to like trick him. So it was Dracula he was holding the whole time, and that's why he could like flip him over and bite him. And Sherlock Holmes is just in Dracula's clothes as a distraction. So he bites Moriarty, and Moriarty's like, and then they kill him, and then they eventually throw him off the train into the river. They save the day. They get home, and Watson's like, oh, I had no idea. And as a reader, I had no idea too. It was a very good twist. It was a very good surprise. I did not see that coming. I did not know how they would save the day. So very well done, Sherlock Holmes twist. 10/10 out of twists. You know, as much as I could predict and as much as I could guess, being, you know, genre savvy and vampire savvy and Sherlock Holmes and Dracula and Lovecraft. And there's even references to Poe in here. Like, they keep making jokes about what if an orangutan did it, because that's the twist in Edgar Allan Poe's Murders of the Rue Morgue, is it was an orangutan that did the murders. So, yep, they save the day. They go back home. Moriarty's dead. The Mariner Priest is dead. There's still some vampires in London that they still got to suss out and still use their, like, league of, midnight watch people, and vampires are still a problem in England, but they're getting to the bottom of it. Mina and Dracula are happy. We still have never heard what happened to Van Helsing or Arthur Holmwood, so they could still be out there. We don't know. It wasn't them all along. It was Moriarty all along. And, Holmes is pretty pleased. Watson's living his best vampire life. Everyone's like, oh man, I'm sorry your wife died. Let's really talk about our grief now. And Watson's like, thank you. That means a lot. And, like, Kitty comes back. She's like, yeah, I feel grief too, because my bro died, and so I can grieve with you. And Watson's like, I can grieve with you. And, they're best friends. And they're well, let's see what their next case is. And there is a sequel, supposedly, to this book where they go up against Jekyll and Hyde. And Watson still doesn't trust Dracula. And at the end, Holmes is like, look, we gotta keep Dracula as an ally because there's still vampires out there, and wouldn't you rather have him on your side? And Watson's like, I guess so. So Holmes has an idea that he's going to be needing Dracula's help in the near future again because, the sequel's Holmes against Jekyll and Hyde. Though, considering that this was called Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula, and Dracula was the first story, and then there were 4 other stories that spun off it, I'm guessing Jekyll and Hyde is probably just going to be one of 4 in other things too. Like, who knows? So the general consensus of book club was that this was a good Sherlock Holmes story if you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes and Sherlock Holmes pastiches. But if you're not, and most of my book club weren't, hadn't ever read any Sherlock Holmes, so didn't get how well done it was in the vein of that, or just didn't care because it's not why they're here. It's a vampire book club. We're here for the vampires. And we're disappointed that there wasn't more Dracula in this. He's only in the first and last story, and he's also not really Dracula. He's this retconned, reimagined version of, like, but Dracula, Stoker lied. Dracula didn't do any of those things. And, he's actually a good guy all along. Like, yeah, kind of scary and intimidating. And yes, he murder rates people, but, he didn't murder those people. And he wasn't behind Lucy's death or anything else. So he's not really Dracula. He's just kind of an original character. Not my favorite version of Dracula, but the Sherlock Holmes stuff was done very well. And I still, Dracula aside, this is still a vampire book because Watson is a vampire for the entire course of this book, and his vampire nature plays heavily into how he solves the mystery. So don't read this book for Dracula, read this book for Vampire Watson and the other vampires he goes up against. Vampires through and through, very much a vampire book, just not so much a Dracula book. Like, they put Dracula's name and image on the front clearly to sell copies because brand name recognition, but as a vampire book about other vampires, solid. One blurb on the back says that it's an adventure rooted in complex feelings about family loyalties and full to the brim with mystery. And I'm like, family loyalties? I was trying to think, like, did I not get the vampire metaphor in this book? Like, what's the family loyalties? Maybe Sherlock and Watson are kind of a found family sort of thing? Well, I guess some of the clients, the victims, had family loyalties. Like, there was the sisters, there was the sister and the brother in the last one. I don't get this blurb, but as far as, like, what vampires mean in this, it was really all about, like, your strength of character. Like, bad things could happen to you. You could become afflicted with this scientific condition, blood disease, and you could let it consume your life. You could let this condition turn you into someone who is not, not a good person, not ideal, not, like, worthy of living, or you could be like a strong English fortitude and maintain your personality and not let this disease take over your life. Like, I don't know if this is an ableist metaphor or like a pro-disability, like, you go get them kind of encouragement tale. I'm not quite sure how to take this as far as vampire metaphors go, but they were certainly there. Like, it definitely is using vampires in that way, as treating it like a condition that could ruin your life. if you let it. But you could rise above the horrible things that happen to you if you were a strong, morally focused person who isn't going to let a condition, not necessarily a disease or a disability, but like maybe hard times, maybe a financial blow, or maybe some other bad thing that happened to you, control your life. Like you could still retain your sense of morality and your sense of self through that and rise above it. Yeah. Take that as you will. All right, now I'm going to look at the chat because you guys have been saying a lot. I'm going to see what you've said and talk about what you want to. I read this before even finding out about the book club doing this, part of my Victorian mashup. Personally, I preferred Anno Dracula and other Dracula Holmes crossovers. Yeah, and considering that this is like the most recent in a very long line of Dracula Holmes crossovers, I wouldn't say it stands out. I wouldn't say it's like new and fresh and different and better than the others. I guess I don't know if any of the others have Holmes and Dracula teaming up the way this one does, or if Dracula is usually an adversary. So I can't say that that was a unique twist to this, but it was something I hadn't seen before, so there's that. But again, he's not even really Dracula. The only way Holmes and Dracula can team up is if you completely strip Dracula of his book personality and everything and make him this entirely new character who's like, Stoker was lying the whole time. I was very disappointed with the treatment of the female vampires. Even with Kitty, Watson kept making pot shots of her. Yeah, the female vampires, kind of like in Stoker, became very licentious and like, you know, slutty hoes. Kitty wasn't slutty, but she was still very like, she didn't conform to like feminine ideals, and to Watson that wasn't cool because, you know, he's an old prude. You think it needs to be a comic book? I guess it'd be a very visually satisfying comic book. There's a lot of action scenes. The action and the fights were done well. You know, I read like the book we read last month. I thought the fights weren't done very well, very like screenplay stage direction-y, but this one, you know, really rooted in the emotion of what Watson was going through. So good fight scenes. You would love it if I would release an audio read of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It would be an amazing idea. Well, thank you. I did release an audio read of Carmilla and Polidori's The Vampire. Those are much shorter than Dracula. Dracula would be very long. It'd be a lot of work. But thank you. That's very flattering. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen all over again. The interesting thing is, Alan Moore, when he wrote League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, specifically said he did not want to include either Dracula or Sherlock Holmes, because both of them were too big, too much personality, too much like clout, and they would completely overshadow everything going on in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So he did include Mina, and, you know, in the movie version, she's actually a vampire, but he didn't include Dracula himself or Sherlock Holmes himself, because if Sherlock Holmes was still alive, he would have just solved it immediately. Like, there's no way they could get away with it. And that's the same thing like in Oh No, Dracula. Sherlock Holmes exists, but he's been put in a concentration camp, so he can't just solve it immediately, because if he was there, he would. Just reading your comments. You guys are so funny. You're not asking questions, so I'm not saying it, but I'm enjoying it. Now's your time to ask me more questions about this book. Save your other questions for after. We'll get to them later, but this is book time. Scrolling through the chat. With everything that got changed about Dracula, why did the wives have to be... Yeah, Dracula's wives were pretty awful. They were just like these mindless banshee women, because most vampires become mindless. why did he live with them for 300 years? Like, yeah, Mina is superior to them and Mina's his one true OTP, but these women, he lived with them. But apparently he didn't even like them. As soon as he got a new girlfriend, he just like kicking them to the curb. Why is Dracula barely in this book? Dracula's presence was throughout this book. And he was in the beginning and the end. I wouldn't say he was barely in it. He was in half of it. He was in thoroughly half of the book. But 4 separate short stories. The book is named after the first short story. It's pretty common when you have collections like this. So is Dagon rescuing all the lost vampires that sank? No. Dagon was just used as like a fast travel from America to England. Literally, they sacrificed to him. They put chains on him. Like, apparently he's, a Leviathan, like, giant sea beast. Who knows? It's incomprehensible. We can't imagine him. But they chained him up, and he dragged them to England, because he just was going there. He goes that fast, if they pray enough. And then they chopped him free, and then he was gone. And, like, in the scene where the fish, frog people come up out of the ocean, there's, like, 25 of them all rising up out of the ocean. There's like burbling and darkness below, so you're like, oh, is Dagon down there? I don't know. But we never see him again. Why were the deep ones in Dagon there? Because it's a Victorian Gothic mashup, Just because this only had Sherlock, Dracula, and Lovecraft so far, this is the Classified Dossier series. There's going to be a lot more. Jekyll and Hyde is next that we know of, and who knows who else. Sherlock could be fighting everyone. So I think it was just kind of planting that seed of like, this isn't just Sherlock and Dracula. This is an everything mashup. Which again, I love everything mashup, so we'll see. Mina was probably the best of the female characters. Yes, she was. But it also did the thing that most adaptations do where they make Mina into Superwoman. Where she's just like, perfect in every way, and she always has the right answer, and she's the only one that can keep Dracula under her thumb, and everyone's like, wow, a woman actually being smart, that's amazing. Like, she even impresses Sherlock Holmes. Wow, a smart woman, wow. And it's just kind of condescending, the way everyone just thinks Mina's so awesome. Because other women are just not, apparently. Like, the way they contrast Mina's awesomeness to normal women, she's not like the other girls, is condescending. There must be books about the brides, right? Yes, I have a couple different series on my vampire bookshelf that are specifically about the life stories of Dracula's brides. We could read those. I've already read some of them, so they'd be rereads for me, but we could definitely read that in the future. There better be Frankenstein the next one. I would like that. You know what I would really like? You know what I would like most of all? Can you guess? The Phantom of the Opera. My boy. I would like that very much. Dowry of Blood. That's coming out pretty soon. We could read that pretty soon. Dowry of Blood was a independent novel that got a big fan base, so now it's getting published by a Big 5 publisher, which is the dream. Good for it. And apparently it's been like revised and edited, so it doesn't have any of the errors it used to have. I heard a rumor in the New York Post today that Phantom is closing on Broadway. That rumor was confirmed by the New York Times and the Phantom show itself. Phantom is closing on Broadway. February 18th is the last day Phantom of the Opera will be on Broadway after 35 years of being on Broadway. Yes, we are in mourning today. That's why I'm wearing black. Not that I always wear black. But that's not about the book. We're supposed to be talking about the book. Are we done? Are we done with this book? Time to move on? Any last thoughts, feelings, questions about Sherlock Holmes, ampersand, Count Dracula? The Phantom would be too proud to accept vampirism for himself, just like Sherlock Holmes. Well, Holmes wasn't too proud. He was just convinced that he would be a horrible vampire, an evil monster vampire, because he has a logic brain, not an emotion brain. But the Phantom has an emotion brain. The Phantom is more emotion brain than Watson and Dracula and Mina. I feel like the Phantom would survive that and still be himself, but also have like cool super vampire powers. Maybe he'd be a good vampire. Favorite fight? I don't know. I mean, all the fights were okay, but none really like stuck out at me as like, that was awesome. Well written, well done. I've never read any work by Christian Klaver before, but I would again if he wrote something different. I don't know that I would read the sequel to this because I feel like I've kind of had my taste. If the book club voted for it, I would, but time to try something else. Point of the Vampire Book Club is to try lots of new and different things and read the books I normally wouldn't read that are on my shelf and have been for years, but you know, need the extra encouragement of friends to read them with me. I have not seen any of the Hammer Sherlocks, no. Just the more modern versions. None of the classics. Unless you count The Great Mouse Detective, the best version of Sherlock Holmes out there. Alright, so next up on the Vampire Book Club, we decided we wanted to read a book that I have read before, to reread it in preparation for a vampire TV show that's coming out. And there are 3 vampire TV shows that are coming out this month and next month, imminently. 3 brand new vampire TV shows on the TV. It's a vampire renaissance. Vampires are back. Vampires are getting adapted everywhere. So the new TV shows coming out are the Vampire Academy TV show, the Let the Right One In TV show, and The Interview with the Vampire TV show, which I am very excited about. I've actually watched most of it already because they sent journalists the screeners ahead of time. I have so many thoughts and feelings. We can talk about that later. So I put up Interview with the Vampire, Let the Right One In, and Vampire Academy first book to vote to see. I've read them all before. I've read them all more than once, except Vampire Academy I've only read once, but I've read the other 2 more than once. Interview with the Vampire and Let the Right One In are 2 of my top 5 favorite vampire books of all time. And I let the book club vote which book they wanted to read in preparation for the incoming TV show. Would be a reread for me. I've done videos already on all of these, so I don't know what you want me to say about these books I didn't already say in my videos, but we're gonna figure it out. And the book that won was Let the Right One In. It was very close between Let the Right One In and Interview with the Vampire, neck and neck for a while, but Let the Right One In came through. Most people said it was because they hadn't read it before and they wanted to read something new. Even though it's rereads for me, it's not rereads for you. Let the Right One In. It is a horror novel. It's very scary. I don't generally read horror, like scare you while you're reading horror. I read like gothic horror, obviously. But this book is scary. It will keep you up at night. It will horrify you. It's very scary. It's good. It was originally written in Swedish, translated to English, very well translated. I was told once that the author himself did the English translation, but then I think I found out I was wrong about that. I'm not sure. I might be right about that. It's been made into 2 films. Let the Right One In, a Swedish film. It's an amazing film if you like gritty, noir, Swedish cinema. And then a remake that wasn't another adaptation of the book, but a remake of the film, almost a shot-for-shot remake of the Swedish film done in America, called Let Me In. And the main difference between that is, in the book, the vampire, this vampire here, Ellie, is like genderless, kind of gender ambiguous. They think she's a girl, and then they're not sure what she is, and then it turns out she's a boy, but then she's not really, and gender is a big theme and issue in the book. And the people that are attracted to Ellie are like, am I gay? Is this like a gay crisis I'm having? And it's part of it. But in the movie Let Me In, the American version, Ellie was just a girl. And there's a boy that there's a romance with, even though they're kids. It's like this sweet, childish romance. And they completely straightwashed it, took all of the gender ambiguity out of it, and made it just a cishet romance. Which I didn't like. There were other reasons why I didn't like that movie, and I talked all about that in my video on Let the Right One In, which you can watch on my channel, along with the book. But the book club wants me to talk about it again, wants to read it again with me. It will be my 3rd read through of this book. It's a pretty chunky book. The person who pledged on Patreon for me to review this book had to buy 2 book pledges, or like because normally my book pledge is like for a certain amount of pages, and this goes over that, so they had to like pay extra to get me to do that review, and they happily did it because they wanted to hear me talk about it. But what is this book? For those of you who don't know, I will read you the summary. 12-year-old Oscar is obsessed by the murder that's taken place in his neighborhood. Then he meets the new girl from next door. She's a bit weird, though, and she only comes out at night. That's it. That's all it says. Very short summary. Is there another summary in here? If it was a hardback, it would probably have a real summary on the flap, but it doesn't. Yeah. But whenever people ask me about vampire book recommendations, this is one I always recommend. I say it's one of my favorites. It's amazing. It just kind of blew me away. And to follow up on my story from the beginning of the stream, when I went to that vampire book club in New York where nobody else showed up, this was the book we read. And that's how I was introduced to this book. And I was like, well, at least I got to read an amazing book for it. And then I talked about it with that one person who showed up. And yeah, it was this book. It was this book all along. That was the first time I read it many years ago. And then I reread it to do my video on it. And now I'm going to read it again. I think I might read the audiobook this time for some variety and like hear, different inflections other than in my own head. Yeah, try something different because I have read it twice already. I'll do the audiobook this time. Yeah, so the TV show comes out October 12th, I want to say. Come on, camera. Yeah, there we go. October 12th on Showtime? Pretty sure it's Showtime, yeah. Which I don't have, so I don't know how I'm going to watch it. I'll have to figure it out. Yeah, so the vampire is a child vampire. She's, I forget how old she is, but like somewhere between 9 and 12. Child vampire. Which is interesting that all 3 of the books that are getting TV shows this time feature child vampires. This one is Ellie, and then Interview with the Vampire is Claudia, and then Vampire Academy is about teenage vampires going to vampire school. So all have child vampires. It'll be interesting. I think the TV show version that's coming out has also straight washed it, and Ellie is just a girl vampire. But I don't know anything about it. I haven't really been following it because I've been following Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire TV series obsessively. It's become my life. If you want to talk about that, I will talk about that. But read Let the Right One In. Even if it wasn't for Vampire Book Club, I would tell you to read this. This is a book I tell everyone to read. Always recommend. And I hope you all enjoy it. You can join the Vampire Book Club on the Discord. The link is in the description of this video. And listen to us talk about the book or talk about it with us as we read along. You have until October 13th to read this book. Or actually, I think the TV show is coming out sooner than that. So, yeah. You can read it before the show comes out, which maybe is October 5th, actually. Or you can read it to October 13th, which is when we'll do our live stream about it. And I might format that live stream a little different than usual because I have already talked about this book and broken down the plot and done the whole summary and everything. Usually I run through the whole book with you and comment along the way, but I might do something different this time. I might make it more interactive. Maybe you can prepare questions ahead of time and we can do it that way. It'll be interesting. You can watch my video on it on my channel, Let the Right One In. I talk about the book and the 2 movie versions, the differences, the similarities, and the themes. All the themes in the book. Oh, yes. You want me to tell you more about Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire show? Is it Anne Rice o'clock? What time is it? 10 o'clock. So, yeah, usually we end these streams around 10, but I can stay to talk about Anne Rice. We always devolve into talking about Anne Rice at the end of these streams, don't we? That's okay. That's why I'm here. So, I have been following the Anne Rice Interview with the Vampire TV show, which is premiering on AMC and AMC Plus October 2nd. If you pay for the AMC Plus streaming service, you get 2 episodes on October 2nd, and then every episode a week thereafter. If you don't pay, if you just watch on TV, you get 1 episode on October 2nd, every episode a week thereafter, so the paying customers are a week ahead. So I'm going to be releasing my recaps and my breakdowns of the episodes a week ahead. So if you want to watch my videos without spoilers as they come out, you're going to have to pay for the service and watch the episodes a week ahead of time with everyone. Fast pass, right? Or you can wait a week and watch my videos later. And I have seen the first 5 episodes of the TV series, and I cannot tell you anything about them because they are review embargoed, and I cannot break that embargo. But I can tell you anything about the trailers or the history behind it, or there was a new panel that got just released this morning with the actors and the showrunners talking about why they made the changes they did. You can ask me questions. One thing that's everyone's very excited about the interview with the vampire TV show is that it takes the gay subtext from the book and makes it text. I would argue that's not subtext in the book anyway, but yeah, the vampires are openly gay in the show, and everyone's excited about that. So in the panel that got published this morning, that was from a different convention, the interviewer asks the showrunner, Roland Jones, why did you make so many changes? Because the time periods change. Louis is changed from white to black. Claudia's changed from white to black. Claudia's older. The interviewer is older. And he basically said that he couldn't just adapt the book as it's written. He had to do something different because the book that's written is already there. So he was thinking about how to bring it up to modern times, because in the movie, the interview isn't set in the 70s like it is in the book. It's set in that modern time when it came out, 1994. So now the interview is set in 2022. But instead of saying it's the first interview, this is where it begins, he's saying it's the second interview, and now our interviewer is older and wiser and can ask better questions to get the real story, which is Louis' emotional investment, because in the original interview with the vampire, Louis is very angry and bitter and tells a story in a very bitter, hateful way towards Lestat. But then we learn out in the later books that there actually was a romance between them, that Louis did actually have tender feelings for him. He was just too mad to talk about it. So now Louis is telling the story with that more honest opinion about his relationship. Yeah, well, the original story is canon in the universe, but in the universe, the original book was never published. So if you know Anne Rice's books, all the books exist in universe. The interviewer published the book, all the vampires read it, and then got mad about it, like, this Louis person is giving away vampires to the real world. But the real world didn't really believe it, so Louis got away with it. But in the show, that book was never published. So they did the interview and recorded it on tape, but it never went anywhere beyond that. So now they're going to redo the interview, ostensibly to publish it this time for real. And then supposedly the rest of the sequence of events of the books are going to follow. So the vampire Lestat, where Lestat reads that book and reacts to it and does all of his crazy rock star stuff or whatever it's going to be this time, will be happening in the future, because that book hadn't existed yet. So the book will come out after 2022. Supposedly he'll read it then, and then we'll see what happens. Someone keeps painting. My camera has a mind of its own. I don't know why, because I'm not moving that much, right? Yeah, it's still going around. Did I like it? That's a tough question. So I have accepted that it's different from the books. I wasn't expecting it to be the same, but I was hoping that the spirit of the characters that I love so much were going to... I wanted Lestat to feel like Lestat. I wanted Louis to feel like Louis. I wanted Claudia to feel like Claudia. And there were moments in the show where I'm like, they would never. That is so against their personality. They wouldn't. But there's other moments in the show that I loved. So moment by moment, I had different feelings. And now that I've watched the episodes 4 or 5 times, they've grown on me. So the first time I watched it, I was just kind of too shocked and taken aback to really even know what I felt or know what I thought. Because it's very different from the show, and that's the point. They explained that they wanted to bring something new to the audience with the characters we love, with the story beats we love, but tell a different story, tell an exciting story where we don't know what to expect, we don't know what's going to happen. And it's true, there's a lot of stuff that I never expected. But after having watched it, going back and rewatching it again, it grew on me, and now I'm kind of obsessed with it. Is that liking it? I don't know. I like it as its own thing. Like, as a vampire show, I like it. But as a version of the characters, they're so different All 3 of them are so different, and 4 if you count Daniel. Like an alternate universe version of them. It is what it is. They're well done. Like the actors all do an amazing job with the script as it is written. They're all fabulous. I know my light keeps flickering. I'm sorry. It's because it's plugged into a USB port and for some reason it's not getting enough power. Has there been an explanation about Louis being up during the day and in front of the window yet? Not publicly. I know the explanation because I've watched the show, but publicly they haven't said anything about it. They seem to just be taking it for granted that Louis can be up during the day, the same way that in the 1994 movie, Claudia gets out of her coffin during the day and kind of like skirts around the sunbeam. So as long as she's not in the sunbeam when she tiptoes over to Louis's coffin, she's okay. If she's in the shadow, it's okay, but in the sunbeam, she wouldn't be okay. So they probably took their inspiration from that, is my guess. That they can be up during the day. They usually don't because they still have to sleep 8 hours, right? But they can't be in direct sunlight. But, you know, in the trailers, Louis up during the day, but you can see his windows are tinted, so he's not in any direct sunlight, which I guess is just the inspiration they're going with. There is no death sleep. There is no coma sleep. We hear in the trailer that Louis is up at 10 o'clock in the morning, so... I think my eyes are 2 different colors. I have a birthmark in this eye that's like kind of orange colored. Maybe that's what you're seeing. Have I given up what? Which is my favorite Lestat now? Tom Cruise or the new guy? They're so different. They are so incredibly different. Tom Cruise was amazing. I love the way he played Lestat. I like the way this guy plays Lestat. There's things I don't like about it, like his French accent. Like, yes, Lestat has a French accent in the book, but it's very subtle. And in Interview with the Vampire, he's French and so is Louis, and they're speaking French to each other, so he wouldn't have had an accent. Like, they would have been just speaking the same language. There would be no language barrier. But now in this version, he has this very thick French accent, and Louis has an American accent. And because the time period is different, New Orleans isn't a French-speaking place anymore, so now he's a French person in New Orleans with a French accent, and it's too much. Like, it's very thick. I couldn't understand a lot of what he said until like my 4th watch through, and even now there's still some phrases he says that I can't understand. So watch it with subtitles. You're going to need them. I like his acting. I like his inflections. I like his attitude. He does a good job with that. But the change of the character, making him this foreign person who's like a fish out of water, is different. That it doesn't really jibe with the way he sort of blended into New Orleans society. Now he sticks out. Yes, you will hear my detailed thoughts on every single episode. So the thing is that I have to release my videos before the end of the month, which I can because the review embargo is up, but they'll be full of spoilers. So I'll be releasing the first 2 videos on episode 1 and 2 before September 30th, but you won't be able to watch the video or watch the episode until October 2nd. So you could watch my video and be completely spoiled if you're on my Patreon, because it will be private. Or you could wait till October 2nd and watch it later. And I hope you're okay with that. It's just I have to release before the end of the month, otherwise, I don't get my Patreon. Thank you, Jessica Dark, for the $30. Oh my god, you're so sweet. Random for spooky season, so you can hit up the at-home store, Michael's or John's. Yes! I'm gonna go get me some Halloweenies. Thank you. Forgive me, but there was a book she wrote that specifically focused on Armand, right? The one that has the story of him wanting to become a priest. Yes, it is called The Vampire Armand. That is a book. AMC bought the rights to all 18 books. That's 15 vampire books and 3 witch books, which are interconnected. They cross over. And The Vampire Armand is one of them. And they said at Comic-Con in the panel that was just released, which you can watch on AMC Plus right now, in their behind-the-scenes special, that they want to make all the books into TV series. I don't think they'll make 18 seasons worth of television, I don't think these actors will still be playing those same characters 18 years from now, but they can use those books as part of their episodes. So maybe Armand's story, if he comes into the TV series, we'll see his life story in a flashback episode or something. And instead of it being a whole season on its own, it might be condensed. Nobody knows who's playing Armand, when Armand is coming in. This season ends halfway through the book Interview with the Vampire. It's only the first half of the book. If we want to see the full book, they have to get a second season, which means people have to pay for AMC Plus, and they have to make money. So if you want them to get a second season to see the second half of Interview with the Vampire, you're going to have to give the man money. And Armand is in the second half of the book after Louis and Claudia go to Europe, go to Paris. So that's where they'll meet Armand, and where the Armand character and who's playing him will be introduced. And nobody knows how he's going to be portrayed, whether he's going to be aged up to be an adult like the Broadway musical did and like the movie did, or if they'll have him looking young and if they're going to address the age concerns. Who knows? Why do people keep asking me if I'm tired? Have I seen the entire series or just the first 2? I've seen the first 5, so there's 2 left that I haven't seen, that nobody's seen. And I don't know if I'm going to get the chance to see them before they air, if they'll release screeners of those 2, or if I'll, get through the first 5 having known ahead of time, and then I'll be on the same page as everyone else when 6 and 7 come out. I don't know. I wonder if they'll do anything with the zombie pyres that Louis and Claudia come across in Europe. There was a big kerfluffle in the spring about some of the audition scripts getting leaked, and one of those leaked scripts did have the zombie pyres in it. Who knows if that got kept in the show? Who knows if it's real? Who knows if it's rumor? But apparently, yes. Obviously not in season 1. That would be in season 2, so who knows? Claudia and Armand would be the same age if they did that in this version, kept him young. No, because Claudia is 14 in this TV show, and Armand was 17 when he was made a vampire, so they would not be the same age. They'd have like a big gap. But Louis and Lestat are aged up in their 30s, so there's a bigger age difference there. The vampire Lestat, there was a queen in rags that was the leader of the vampires, which Alma was a part of. Yes, that is Alessandra. She was kind of crazed because she had lived so much in seclusion that she kind of lost her mind, and she was shown as this very mentally unhealthy vampire. And then when the coven gets destroyed, she throws herself on a bonfire and she commits suicide. And then Armand starts throwing all the other vampires on the bonfire, and he kills his entire coven except the 4 who escape. But we find out in the new novels that Alessandra didn't die. Surprise, she's been alive this whole time. After she was on the fire, she crawled into the dirt and spent, 200 years healing. She comes back in modern times, and she's got her mind back, and she is now a beautiful princess, which is what she was to start with. She was never an old crone. She was a beautiful princess that just kind of withered because of her lifestyle. And she's not a major character, but a recurring character in the Prince Lestat books. Why do you guys keep asking if I'm tired? Do I look tired? Don't tell a woman she looks tired. It's condescending and rude. I'm not tired, I'm just ugly. Be nice to me. Sorry, I don't know why my light keeps flickering like that. Let's see if I can turn it down a little bit. Well, if you're tired, maybe we should go to bed. So you have any more thoughts or feelings you want to talk about, Anne Rice? I'm so excited about this show. I know you're not here for Anne Rice, even though we always devolve into it in the Vampire Book Club, but I'm so excited about this show. Obviously I've already watched it, but I'm still just excited for it to be like in the world, to see how people react to it, to see if it becomes a thing, to see if people latch onto it and they're like, yes, we're getting another season. It's a very expensive show. AMC put a lot of money into it. They really invested in it. It looks expensive, it costs a lot, and all the advertising and marketing they're doing for it costs a lot. So they're really counting on this show to take off and for them to get a second season, for it to be a franchise. They want it to be like a Marvel Cinematic Universe. Besides this show, there's also going to be, you remember how when Game of Thrones came out, after every episode there was another like mini episode where D&D talked about like what was their thinking behind this episode, what did this scene mean, what did this scene mean, and they just kind of talked back at you for another little episode. They're doing that with this. It's called Obsessed with the Vampire, and it's going to tie into some merchandise. So in it they're going to be talking about items that you can buy and then linking you like an Amazon storefront. I don't know, it's not specifically merchandise for this, but things that exist that you can buy that are connected to it. So that's coming out after every single episode. And then they're also working on another spin-off series called Night Island, which is not about the Night Island in the books. They just took that name and applied it to their own thing. And in the Night Island TV series, they're going to use the Anne Rice's world, her brand of vampires, her brand of witches, create some original characters, have them be workers on this resort island in this hotel, like a hotel staff sitcom sort of thing, like Faulty Towers, but vampires and witches. And that's a show they're doing. So even if Interview with the Vampire doesn't take off, even if there's no clamor from the audience that they want more Anne Rice books adapted, they have the Anne Rice universe property to create their entirely own show with original characters or maybe cameos from book characters, using themes and plots and worlds and ideas from the book. And maybe that's what will take off. Maybe they'll put all their eggs in that basket. They are also making the Mayfair Witches, a TV series that just wrapped filming recently. From what I've heard about it, it is also exceedingly different from the books. They changed the nature of the witches entirely. They cut out characters that you thought were integral, and apparently they're not. They're completely cut out. It's going to be very different from the book. We'll see how that goes. Oh, my thoughts on the trailers have been reassuring. I'm glad. I mean, if you don't like this show, you will get no judgment from me. I'm not telling you have to like it. I'm obsessed with this franchise. It is my life. It is my world. I spend every day thinking about Lestat and Friends. So it's a big deal to me. And a lot of my friends just absolutely want to have nothing to do with it, and it's valid. I've had very complicated feelings about it. But being obsessed with it is kind of how I manage that. I have to know everything at all the times. Am I at liberty to say how saucy the show is? My mother wants to watch a show with me when it comes out, but I fear it'll become very awkward very fast. There is nudity. There's never full frontal nudity. You do see some boobs. You do see some butts. It's actually pretty minimal. For a show set in a brothel district, I thought there would be a lot more boobs and butts, and maybe some other nudity. I thought it would be like Game of Thrones, where you see the very sexy sex workers seducing people, but it's not like that. It mostly shows the working girls as just like people working and living their life and dealing with problems and dealing with racism and other stuff going on in their working life. There are romance scenes between Lestat and Louis, so if your mom is homophobic and seeing two men kissing and doing whatever romance things men do would make you feel awkward with her, be aware of that. It is very romantically gay. But it's not, like, you don't actually see people actively having sex together. There's no, like, humping or anything. There's, mouth stuff, I guess, is the furthest it goes. But it's always off screen, like you don't actually see it. It's like someone will like disappear off the bottom of the screen and you know what they're doing down there, but they don't show it. Is there any hint of them doing a separate Vampire Lestat series? Not that they've said. My idea, which is pretty good, and they should do my idea, but I don't know if they will, is next season, if they get a season 2, when Louis and Claudia do go off to Europe and are with Armand, what's their Lestat actor, Sam Reed, going to do? He's their star actor. They can't have this actor sit a season out because he's not in that part of the book, right? So maybe he will be back in New Orleans recovering from whatever they do to escape. In the book, Claudia slits his throat and he gets set on fire. So if it's the same thing or if it's something different. So recovering in New Orleans, maybe when it cuts back to him during the episodes, that's when we'll get his memories of his backstory and we'll get flashbacks of Vampire Lestat. I think that would be a great way to do season 2, but who knows? They might do something totally different. But they haven't said. We don't know for sure. I don't know. I'm not keeping secrets. I just don't know. The gay scenes like the ones from Rocketman. I haven't seen Rocketman. I don't know. If you watched the trailer, you've seen some of those gay scenes. They put them right in the trailer. Like, that's what it is. It's that kind of stuff. Did they get the immortal thing right? Because it's so rare. What do you mean by the immortal thing? I'm not sure what you mean. Elaborate, please. Do I have a favorite actor thus far? They're all my favorites. They all do a really good job playing the characters that are written on the page. Like, I don't think they're playing the characters from the book. I mean, Louis is an entirely new character. He does have some traits of Louis from the book, like he's conflicted, he's a reluctant vampire, he doesn't want to kill people, he wants to eat animals, which you've seen all in the trailer. Like, those traits are there, but the reason why he's like that is different from the books, because now it's about him chafing against society as a black man, which is what the description says. And Lestat's attraction to him, which was talked about in the panel today, is because he's got that like conflict in him. He is someone struggling against society. He is othered. Louis doesn't fit into the white society. And what they were saying in the panel that released this morning was like, who would a vampire like Lestat be attracted to after he's been in his relationship with Nikki and after what he went through with his mother? What kind of person would that be? And they thought about it and they're like, well, it would have to be a very conflicted person. It would have to be a person who didn't feel like they belonged in society. And that's how they came up with the idea to do a Creole black man in a white society, this person who doesn't fit in and is always chafing. And that's the kind of person they thought Lestat would be attracted to. And they built Louis' whole new personality around that. And also Claudia. She's now 14. She's a totally different person. She's still a vampire child, so she does have those Claudia elements there. But, you know, her thought process is different from Book Claudia. Her attitude, the way she talks, it's not similar to Book Claudia at all. But the actor does a very good job doing this new Claudia that's written. It's kind of like a what if fanfic. Like, what if they adopted a 14-year-old instead of a 5-year-old? What would that be like? Well, this is what that would be like. Immortals never act immortally. They act like stupid kids, almost never portraying the experience that would come with the passage of time. Well, Louis and Claudia are very young in this show. Instead of spending 65 years with Lestat, they told us at Comic-Con that they only spend 20 years, or 30 years together, from 1910 to 1940. This is a much shorter time span of them together. Lestat is still from the 1700s, so he's like 160 years old. So he does have some of that immortal stuff. I think you'll like what you see with him, with the immortal stuff, but we don't really get there with the other vampires yet. I mean, immortality weighing on Claudia is kind of Claudia's whole deal, right? Like, she realizes she's trapped in a 5-year-old body, and she's going to be like that forever and never be able to experience womanhood. And with 14-year-old Claudia, from what they said at Comic-Con and stuff, it sounds kind of the same. So that weighing on her. But she comes to that realization in a much shorter time period. So instead of Claudia taking 60 years to realize that, she realizes that in like 5 years. Gorgeous freaking wolf eyes. It's the light. It's almost 10:30. We'll go till 10:30. You have 6 minutes. Now's your chance. I'll give you some time to talk and ask me questions. Anything else you want to say or do before you finish. In the meantime, join the Vampire Book Club. It's in the description. Or just join the Discord server. It is a gothic themed Discord server. We talk about vampires and spooky stuff, anything on that theme, anything that you think fits in my Maven-y Maven-ness is what we discuss on that server, a themed Discord server. Just a nice place to hang out with other spookily inclined people, make some friends. It's a pretty chill server. There's about 600 people there, but it's not very active actually. Like, the threads never get out of control. Oh, you received my book? You can't wait to read it? Yes, thank you. Thank you. This book club is supported by my Patreon patrons. I don't charge for this book club. It's not something that I charge my patrons for, but the other stuff I do charge my patrons for contributes towards supporting this book club. So thank you to my Patreon patrons. You are very special, and you make all of this possible. If I didn't have Patreon, I would have to stop doing the book club. So thank them. Of the 3 upcoming vampire shows, which do you have the highest hopes for? Well, considering that I know this one's been straight washed, I don't really have that high hopes for it. But if that's the only thing that's like not to like about it, maybe it could be great. Vampire Academy from the trailers doesn't look that great. The movie, if you've watched my video, you know is not a great movie either. Most people were disappointed with the Vampire Academy movie. My main problem with it was it felt rushed. It felt like the actors didn't get a chance to like really get into their roles. Like, they seemed like it was their first take. They didn't get to do more line reads, so it felt very choppy and weird. But it was also just condensed in a weird way. So maybe the show will give it more time to breathe, but I'm not really have much high hopes for that, considering everyone I've seen has been like, this trailer looks so bad. I haven't heard anyone say anything bad about this. Interview with the Vampire, what would my hopes be? I've already watched it. My hopes would be that other people can enjoy it. And I think there's a chance if people give it a chance, if you treat it as its own show, treat it as like just a new vampire show on TV that's loosely inspired by Interview with the Vampire, not trying to be it. Maybe you'll like it. I have to find a way to watch this. I don't have Showtime, so I don't know if I have to get a Showtime account. But please join us this month reading Let the Right One In. This is a vampire book I recommend every vampire fan read, even if it's not for the book club. You should read it. Maybe you can do like I do and try out the audiobook this time. I have to see if my library has it. Have I seen The Invitation that just came out? No, I haven't. I don't really get a chance to go to movie theaters very often. It's difficult for me. But I do want to see it. I have heard it's not that great, but it still has its merits. So I don't have like high expectations, so maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised on The Invitation. Oh, you sent me a Halloween package? Little? Yeah, little. I'll believe that when I see it. Your packages are always huge, but thank you. Have I seen Morbius? No, I have not. Never actually saw Morbius. I should watch that too. Don't have high hopes for that. Wants to live forever? I do. I'd love to be a vampire. I would live forever. On that note, thank you for joining me for the Vampire Book Club. See you next month on October 13th or thereabouts to discuss Let the Right One In anticipation of watching the TV show. And the TV show will have already come out by then, so maybe we'll be able to compare the TV show to the book if we've all watched the first episode. Unless Showtime is doing the thing where they drop it all at once, then we may have watched it all. But we'll see. So that'll be a nice compare and contrast that we can all do. And please join my Discord server and tell me your thoughts and feelings, because I've already read this book and I've already shared all my thoughts and feelings. I don't know that I have anything more to say. Maybe I'll surprise myself, but I do want to hear what you have to say, and that's what's going to be different this book club time. So please come to the Discord server and tell me everything. And until next time, happy reading, good night, happy vampires, and so on and so forth.